Uh-oh.
I think you should wear one of those salmon color hoodies that Davidson wore on Saturday Night Live. I mean, what if you just came out one night and you did the whole opening breaking news monologue?
You're breaking
in like
up
a
on me. You're causing trouble.
Hoodie.
Yeah,
That'd be cool. Frost your hair.
You're breaking up. I can't hear you. Hello?
You always do that. When I get a good joke, you always do that. You always say you can't. It's like that old commercial. Can't hear you. Water running. Remember that from the long time ago?
Hang on. Water's running. Marco Rubio moment.
Exactly. Oh,
and by the way, Marco did warn us about all of this. He was the first.
Oh, my God. He's
pretty
been
scary
great.
What's happened down there.
No. Hannity, aren't you having a flashback, though? Remember we were on the air in the 2000 recount and kept going back and forth all night long? I think I was on the air with...
Pimpled, perforated, scattered, smothered, and covered. I mean, it just is,
The question is, why haven't they learned anything from now?
18 years ago.
No. It's pathetic. But you had a fantastic show, as always, tonight,
Hannity.
Have
a great
Thanks
show.
so much.
Good to see you, as always.
All right. I'm Laura Ingraham, and this is the Ingraham Angle from Washington tonight. There are a flurry of lawsuits in the Florida recount battle. Hannity talked about some of them. And in moments, a live report from outside the Broward County Election Center. We're also going to talk to experts there on the ground. Also, in tonight's angle, you do not want to miss this one, Michelle Obama's new memoir targets Trump, race, and her own marriage. Well, you'll hear my take on what the book is really all about ahead of the heated debate we're going to have on that topic. And French President Emmanuel Macron is the latest to hit Trump over the embrace of nationalism. An expert tells us why Trump is right and the French are oh so wrong. But we start tonight on the ground in Florida, where Republicans Rick Scott and Ron DeSantis still cling to razor-thin leads. Here to give us the latest is Fox News correspondent Phil Keating outside the Broward County Elections Board. Phil.
Laura, some Florida counties have already totally completed their recounts. However, not in Broward County nor in Palm Beach County. Here in Broward County, the actual recounting of the votes has still not yet even begun. Looking live inside the Broward County Elections Department's tabulation center, workers are still running 3.5 million pages, sorting out the first pages from the ballots, which have the actual recount races on them. Once that's done, Broward will then run 800,000 ballots through a dozen tabulation machines. The Florida Senate race between Republican Governor Rick Scott and incumbent Democrat Bill Nelson, well, that has Scott leading by just 12,000 votes out of 8 million cast. That's after round one. 6 lawsuits in total have been filed by these two candidates, 4 by Scott, 2 by Nelson. A Broward judge denied Scott's motion today to add state cops inside the recount room and impound machines and ballots when not in use. Well, that has Scott leading by just 12,000 votes out of 8 million cast. That's after round one. 6 lawsuits in total have been filed by these two candidates, 4 by Scott, 2 by Nelson. A Broward judge denied Scott's motion today to add state cops inside the recount room and impound machines and ballots when not in use. However, the judge did decide to add 3 more Broward sheriff's deputies just to make sure everything is secure and running properly. The governor's race not as close as the Senate race, with former Congressman Ron DeSantis leading Tallahassee Democratic Mayor Andrew Gillum by 33,000 votes. Both parties really want their man in the governor's mansion, seeing that as an edge in this toss-up state that is so close. So close, we have 3 statewide recounts going on here. That's happening 2 years from now, the next presidential election. DeSantis is already acting as governor-elect, assembling a transition team and looking at offices in Tallahassee. Meanwhile, Democrat Gillum conceded on Tuesday night, but then he took that back over the weekend once the numbers started closing the gap. And even though he says his odds of winning this recount are incredibly small, he says every vote still deserves to be counted. Now, the recount deadline statewide, and this is Florida statute, is Thursday, 3 p.m. All 67 counties must have their recount numbers in, or according to law, those votes won't be counted. Broward is confident they will make that. However, up in Palm Beach County, where they have older machines, which can only recount 1 race at a time, they do seriously worry that they can make that Thursday deadline. Laura?
Phil, thanks so much. And here now are two people with inside knowledge of how this wacky Florida election systems work, specifically as they relate to Broward and, once again, Palm Beach County. Republican Lizbeth Benaquisto is the rules chair for the Florida State Senate, and Sherry McCartney is an election lawyer in Broward. Sherry, let me start with you. What should the viewers at home need to understand? What do they need to understand tonight about these persistent problems all these years later in Broward County?
Well, hi, Laura. You know, I just left the Supervisor of Elections office, and I can tell you that the tens of thousands of ballots are being run through machines through the night, and we've yet to begin the recount process here.
Wait a second. So it's supposed to be finished by Thursday, and yet
That's
the
right.
mandated recount in Broward County has not yet begun. How is this the 21st century
right.
and the most technologically advanced country on the planet? How is this still possible?
Well, you know, process and procedure are essential to an election. In fact, it's everything. And when that's lacking or perceived to be lacking, this is what results. You know, I worked on the recount in 2000, and some things are different, and frankly, some things stay the same.
Well, what are the things that have changed that should give Floridians and, frankly, all Americans across the country watching this, because so much always seems to hinge on Florida, what should give them faith in the system tonight?
Well, first and foremost, we no longer have chads. So we're not dealing with hanging chads or pregnant chads or any kind of manual vision where we have to hold it up with a magnifying glass. We're dealing with scantrons and bubbling. And so we'll have undervotes and we'll have overvotes, but there'll be a lot less possibility for manipulation and problems like that. I have to tell you that I'm convinced that once this is done, the result that we had on Tuesday night will stand.
All right, Sherry, let's go to you. Palm Beach County, Elizabeth, let's go to you. Palm Beach County, Susan Bucher, who's the election supervisor there, said the following about the Thursday 3 p.m. deadline. Again, this is Palm Beach County. She said, our equipment isn't designed to meet the deadline. And we've been complaining to the state for almost 10 years, and they've never extended the deadline. We'll give it our best shot effort, but what we need to do is machine recount all of our ballots to find the over and under votes. And then she said she didn't know whether she thought, they would miss the deadline or not. Again, same question. We're asking about Palm Beach County. Now, I mean, again, the money they've poured into the electoral process in Florida, yet we're still back at, the machines aren't good enough. I find this whole thing both sad and uproariously funny, if it weren't so important.
Well, thank you for having me, Laura, but the truth is it's unacceptable. And when the supervisor of elections of Palm Beach County raised her right hand and took an oath to follow the law, it wasn't when it was convenient, it wasn't when it was easy, it was every time. And we have every expectation that she will meet the deadline and perform as she has sworn her obligation to do.
Well, Sherry, let's go back to you because Brenda Snipes has spoken out, and she said this after all the questions. Jeb Bush has tweeted today saying she should step aside in Broward County. Let's watch.
The lawsuits as they are written certainly cast aspersions on my character, and usually we build character over a period of time, and character is always on display. And I worked here for about 15 years. And I have to say, this is the first time that this office or I have been under such attacks. So if we make mistakes, we own mistakes.
Okay, Sherry, this is the first time we have ever heard a complaint about Brenda Snipes, okay? And President Obama is going to run for Senate as a conservative in some state, okay? It's like craziness.
Well, I was there today when she said that, and I think she's sincere in what she says, and she truly believes it. But the fact remains that it seems to be incredibly ad hoc. They don't seem to be formal process and procedure, and if they are, they certainly don't seem to be being followed. And when you have that, you're naturally going to have the chaos and the resulting, confusion and basically a sense of crisis in our election system.
Yeah, well, the conventional wisdom is that she's done, Snipes is done, and Scott and DeSantis, presuming they hold on to their slim leads, that they're going to move quickly to replace her. Is that accurate, Senator?
I truly believe that Governor-elect DeSantis will work with the legislature to make sure that we undertake all necessary and appropriate updates and changes to the electoral laws and make sure that we have a system in place that instills confidence in the residents of the state of Florida.
Yeah, I mean, Floridians, at this point, it's just about your pride. Okay, we just got to get your pride back and just fix this. Republican, Democrat, doesn't matter. Just fix this so this ridiculous situation does not occur for the next election. We appreciate both of you being on tonight. And just today, Governor Rick Scott coming under fire. Two different fronts. First, a group of Florida voters and organizations filed a lawsuit alleging that Scott has illegally abused his power as governor to swing the outcome of his race. And second, his opponent, incumbent Democratic Senator Bill Nelson, is calling for his recusal. Watch. We don't have it, so we're going to just keep going. So joining me now, constitutional law expert Professor John Eastman and Miguel DeGrande, a recount expert who worked on the successful Bush 2000 team down in Florida. John, the state judge, Jack Tudor, admonished Governor Scott today for suggesting that voter fraud occurred in this race, saying everything the lawyers are out there saying out there in front of the elections office is being beamed all over the country. We need to be careful of what we say. Words mean things these days. So, John, are Republicans exaggerating this?
I don't think they're exaggerating. And I'm one of the lawyers suing Brenda Snipes right now. What we found is they don't clean their voter rolls for illegal citizens. They don't clean them for felons. They don't clean them for people who die out of state. They do check for people who die in state. But guess what? A lot of Floridians had 2 residences. And, it's just unconscionable that they're not cleaning those rolls. The reason that's so significant is that creates an opportunity for fraud. And when they've uncovered 80,000 ballots after election night, because they wanted to narrow the race, you just got to raise some real serious red flags.
Yeah, well, when people think 80,000 ballots and they think this is the United States of America, that if Jimmy Carter had gone to some foreign country and you had heard about these types of things happening, Jimmy Carter would be giving a speech about how this is like a bloodless coup going on in a particular country's important political race.
That's right. I think the Ugandan delegation is going to come watch our Florida elections on the next one.
Maybe they should be the observer. Miguel, is John overstating this? Because to listen to some of the other types on other networks, this is just outrageous that there is anyone out there alleging voter fraud. This is just a process, Miguel, and the process has to go on, and maybe it takes a little while, but, quote, every vote must be counted. Is that really what's going on here?
Well, we do agree that every vote must be counted, but when you do things behind closed doors, when you do not report periodically as you're supposed to, when you deny access to people to witness an election process, which our law, by the way, requires that it be witnessed, then you do sow doubts in the electorate as to the integrity of the election. Some things we know so far. We know that 22 illegal votes were mixed with votes that were valid votes. That can't be taken back because those are anonymous. We know that at least one non-citizen voted and that the Gillum campaign was advocating to have that vote count. And so when those irregularities occur, when there is no public viewing of the process, it does create questions.
Well, when they say every vote must count, that's such a noble blanket, statement. It's a great sentiment. But, John, isn't it true that every legal vote must count and the rules have to apply across the board regardless of what outcome you wish in the end?
Oh, that's right. And I'll give you one example. A court decision in August against Brenda Snipes. I was intrigued by her saying that she's never made a mistake before. They were opening absentee ballots unsupervised, in secret. The reason that's significant is you've got to verify that the absentee ballot is from a legal voter before that ballot is taken out and put into the anonymous box where you can't otherwise pull it back. And she was doing this and got an injunction issued against her to stop that. These are the kind of things that are routinely going on down there. And that's a problem. We learned it in 2000. We learned about dimpled ballots that can't be dimpled without, breaking the thing unless you've packed in several ballots at once. I mean, these are the kind of things that have been going on there way too long.
Miguel, so there's some of the smaller races, that are very significant positions in Florida have also been affected by this. After trailing Republican Matt Caldwell after Tuesday's vote for the agriculture commissioner, which is a big position in Florida, has enormous significance in policymaking in the state. Democrat Nikki Fried now leads him by 5,326 votes. So they found those votes too. How is this possible that you're finding votes all these days after an election?
That's a big question mark, and we're trying to find out. The bottom line right now is that the votes that were reported Saturday are the universe of votes that are going to be subject to the recount. We have the governor trailing governor-elect trailing by 34,000 votes, the senator-elect trailing by 12,000 votes. I don't think a recount is going to make a difference in this case.
Rarely does, correct? Yeah, they rarely make any difference. Swing 100, 200 votes either way.
Yeah, and even if you bring in the votes that are subject to the lawsuit in the Panhandle, you're talking about 2,000 votes. That's not going to swing this election. And the important thing is to make sure that there are a lot of eyes on this process from this moment on.
Yeah, John, we were talking about so many ways the Republicans could have handled this in the years leading up to this. To me, it's a swing and a miss for Rick Scott, who I think was a phenomenal governor. But why wasn't this cleaned up? I got so many radio callers saying, why isn't this cleaned up by now? Brenda Snipes, by the way, Andrea Mitchell said she was a Republican today. She was a Republican. No, she was appointed by a Republican. Right. Bush, who's now said she should be.
She was appointed by Jeb Bush, but after another election scandal, when they found hundreds of ballots,
Democrat.
Yeah, hundreds of ballots stuffed into a drawer that weren't ever counted.
Yeah.
Look, there are two things here. One, the reason we keep adding new counts is because they're accepting absentee ballots that come in after the legal deadline. That's a violation of Florida law.
Why isn't that a violation of the Voting Rights Act?
Well, it is.
Why doesn't that cancel out lawful votes?
It does cancel out lawful votes. And then the second thing is we don't have any chain of custody. Anybody that watches any crime show knows about the chain of custody evidence. We ought to be applying the same principles to the chain of custody.
The integrity of every document, every ballot must be ensured.
And it ought not to go outside the office without both a Democrat and a Republican watching where it goes.
Will this happen? Right. Are you concerned that this could happen going forward in 2020?
I am very concerned. And, one of the reasons we have the National Voter Registration Act and the Help America Vote Act was to provide money to the states to make sure this stuff didn't happen again.
Yeah, it seems like some of it was wasted. Gentlemen, thank you so much. And up next, my angle takes on Michelle Obama's new memoir. Stay right there.
Is your
Becoming or unbecoming? That's the focus of tonight's angle. Michelle Obama's rolling out her new memoir titled Becoming, with exactly the sort of fanfare we've come to expect from the Obama's 13-city book tour and touchy-feeling arena interviews by celebrity moderators. Today, the former First Lady gave a pre-launch sit-down with GMA's Robin Roberts. And the issue of race figured prominently, even when Mrs. Obama spoke of meeting her husband.
He comes blowing into town, a little bit famous already, late for the first meeting.
Late. I was like, is he trifling? The black man's gonna be late on the first day? I was like,
You weren't overly impressed in the beginning.
I wasn't, I have my suspicions when a bunch of white folks fawn on over a black man, because I sort of think, okay, he can talk straight, so they think he's wonderful. So, so that was my theory.
Huh? Stereotyping much? Well, for all of her beauty, her glamour, her obvious accomplishments, the former First Lady just can't get past race. It's like a loop that almost seems to play in her head, one that surfaces repeatedly in her public comments.
What do you wish you could tell your pre-White House self?
Whew. The hard parts were the things that I expected. That it was going to be hard, So much of this country lives in isolation and we just don't know each other. And so there were people who didn't know what a black woman was and sounded like. And so I knew that was going to be a challenge, that I'd have to earn my grace.
Wait. Americans didn't know what a black woman was and sounded like? Well, what America is that? Long before anyone had ever heard of Barack or Michelle Obama, America had already made enormous progress vis-a-vis race. Think about it. Some of the biggest names in business, medicine, the law, entertainment, sports, and media are African American. But of course, this isn't the first time we heard Mrs. Obama share her feelings about America. Remember this comment she made after her husband won the nomination in 2008.
And let me tell you something. For the first time in my adult life, I am proud of my country because it feels like hope is finally making a comeback.
Well, it was before she won the nomination, but you get the point. Again, until the Obamas showed up, America was in sad shape racially. At least we led to believe that. Well, contrary to her well-cultivated public image, Michelle Obama, from her earliest years at Princeton, was extremely political. Well, that's fine, no big deal. And she grew up in a middle-class Chicago household.
Across the street, I usually meet my friend Terry Johnson right in front of that garage. This is my block.
3 generations of Robinsons lived here on Euclid Avenue, a home owned by Michelle's great-aunt Robbie and Uncle Terry.
Well, she was the daughter of a Democrat ward boss, and she worked her way up to the Ivy League. Laudable, no doubt. But contrast the gauzy media coverage of Michelle's personal story with the way another black female brainiac had been treated over the years. Conservative scholar Condoleezza Rice. Now, Rice grew up in far worse conditions in the segregated South. She would earn degrees from the University of Denver, Notre Dame, and a fellowship at Stanford University, where she eventually became a professor and a provost. Oh, and she did become the first female African-American Secretary of State in 2005, long before anyone heard of Michelle or Barack Obama. Now, I guess Condoleezza was just unable to show us what a prominent woman was like or sounded like, huh? Again, it's all who tells the story. I mean, Michelle Obama collected more magazine covers than vegetables from that White House garden. While a real cover girl, First Lady Melania Trump, of course, supermodel, is lucky if she gets her picture in the Parade magazine insert. This Michelle Obama book launch, when you really think about it, is just one more example of someone cashing in for trashing Donald Trump. And also, of course, it helps set the table for 2020. The Obamas still want to be the big power brokers in the Democratic Party, and Michelle is a global superstar, so she helps frame the issues for a Democratic Party still straddling the old and the new. In the aftermath of the election, Hillary Clinton tried to explain, remember, why 52% of white women voted for Donald Trump.
A sort of ongoing pressure to vote the way that your husband, your boss, your son, whoever, believes you should.
Now, Michelle Obama takes that snide condescension a step further, writing in her memoir, Becoming, I will always wonder about what led so many women in particular to reject an exceptionally qualified female candidate and instead choose a misogynist as their president. Very nice. Now, remember, she wasn't paid that huge advance that she got for her book to share fashion tips or... Here to respond to my angle, Candace Owens, Communications Director for Turning Points USA, Monica Ritchie. All right, Candace, are these political swipes and kind of reworked, old stories, are they really worth half of the reported $65 million advance that Michelle Obama was paid for her memoir by Crown Publishing?
I think to the Democrat Party, they're definitely worth it. I mean, these are the same tired and baseless accusations that everybody says when they want to sell books. We saw this from Michael Wolff. We saw this from Omarosa. They're constantly using the president and trying to feed the divisive rhetoric that's already out there in the media. But I take great exception to the idea that our president, this tired and baseless accusation that he's a misogynist. Misogyny does not appoint Sarah Sanders. Misogyny does not appoint Kellyanne Conway. Misogyny does not appoint everybody on his staff that we are seeing that as being led by women. So it's really ridiculous and it's tired, but it's really unbecoming, especially coming from the former administration, to constantly verbally assault this president.
Rochelle, it's interesting coming from someone who's such a global celebrity as Michelle Obama to hear her sound, I would say, rather ordinary in her criticism of the president. I mean, what she said about the president, without necessarily mentioning his name, was what you'd hear on, one of the other cable networks. Any morning, noon, and night. You could pick that line out of the commentary that you hear from all the Trump haters on the other cables. So how does that really distinguish Michelle Obama from any garden variety leftist?
Well, look, Laura, I think it's no surprise that I'm probably the only person on this panel right now who's really excited to actually read Michelle Obama's book. I think she's an exceptional woman. I think that she serves as a great example to women all across the world that our ticket to success is our brains and not our body. And I think that she's simply telling her truth. I mean, the xenophobic accusations that were hurled at her husband were definitely offensive. And as she mentioned in her book, it put her family at risk. And I think she's just being very candid and very honest. I mean, this is one portion of the book where she's talking about Trump. It's not entirely about Trump. So I don't see really the problem with her writing this book. And I think that many more first ladies, I'm sure First Lady Melania Trump will come out with a book and she will share her personal feelings of what it was like to be in a Trump White House. So I'm not really sure why there's so much anger and hatred as far as Michelle Obama coming out and sharing her truth.
It's not anger, certainly not hatred. We have nothing personally against the First Lady, and I think she's extremely impressive as an individual, as a mother, as a spokesperson for what she believes in. So I think she's very impressive. We're talking about something that they decided to sell this book with. Trump trashing is a cash-in scenario, Monica. When you trash Trump, and you could say the same thing about people criticizing Obama early on in the Obama presidency, come on, be fair here, but you trash Trump, you can get a big advance. But why is that interesting? That's my point. It's interesting to hear about, I guess, her growing up and I guess maybe how she met Barack, although we've kind of heard those stories before. But just Trump's a racist, Trump's a misogynist, Trump's a misogynist, Trump's a... Okay, I mean, we've been hearing that now for years.
Right, and it's boring and predictable, and that's why it's so disappointing to hear it from the former First Lady. I mean, there used to be a rule, Laura, that if you had nothing nice to say about someone, don't say anything at all. And that rule was also supposed to really extend to former presidents, their wives, and others in a president's inner circle. And Mr. Obama's predecessors have abided by that rule, but neither the former president nor the First Lady have. And I wonder if she has some political ambitions of her own, which is why she thinks she can stake out this ground in attacking the president. But I also think that both of them were so concerned when President Trump was elected that their entire legacy was about to go out the window. We were told for 8 years by the Obamas and everyone in their administration that the new normal was high unemployment and the loss of manufacturing jobs and anemic economic growth and American decline and the globalist march. All of these things were inevitable. President Trump has put the lie to all of that. And so I think what you're seeing is enormous frustration and lashing out on the part of Mrs. Obama and, frankly, everybody in the Obama administration.
All right. I want to play for you something from Zerlina Maxwell. I'll go to Candace on this. And she was on MSNBC today on this very subject. Let's watch.
I agree with her. The fact that we elected someone who had no qualifications to be president, who was running against a woman with a laundry list of qualifications to be president, and instead America or the Electoral chose to give the Electoral College to the person with no experience who happened to be a man, just like all of the other presidents. And so what Michelle Obama is highlighting is the fact that that in and of itself is misogynistic and sexist, and perhaps as a country we should take a moment to reflect on that.
Again, women who voted for Trump are either dumb or they're just following their husbands. And we're not going to offer any ideas, Candace, about how to raise the standard of living for the average American. We're just going to call people misogynist, racist, xenophobic, nativist, all the ists and all the isms. They're all worn out. Forget the actual debating of ideas.
That's exactly correct. And look, you're right. It is frustration. It is fatigue. You know, they're not offering anything of substance. There's no ideological debate taking place. It has been proven now. Okay, if you were apprehensive in the beginning about Trump and his lack of experience in the realm of politics, but it's now proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that this president has been tremendously successful. So at this point, it feels a bit like whining. And I think just as Americans, we're ready to move on from this concept of everybody has to be an ism if they don't think like me. You don't elect somebody because they're a woman. You elect somebody because they're the best person suited for the job. And up against Hillary Clinton, President Trump was a much stronger candidate. He ran a better campaign, and that's why he's sitting in the Oval Office today.
Hey, Rochelle, do you think that the press has treated Melania in the same way that they treated Michelle?
Well, look, no, I don't think they have. And I can be honest about that. I mean, when we look at how Michelle Obama was treated, she was treated in a very different way. But I think that's because her husband was also not pushing forward a very divisive rhetoric in the press, and her husband was not attacking the press. So, and this is something, you know, Melania is not innocent in this at all either when it comes to this whole birther issue, which she also peddled for her husband. So, yeah, no, they haven't treated her fairly. But at the same time, I think that they're looking at the sort of administration, the sort of rhetoric that is coming from her husband, and it's not attractive to them.
Are you aware of the polls at the end of the Obama administration about whether the country felt like his 8 years in office had united the country? Are you aware of those, Rochelle?
Well, what I'm aware of is that 77% of this country right now, in the polls that came out just before the midterm elections, says that the country feels that they're more divisive. I am aware of that poll.
I understand that. But what I'm trying to say, and Monica, I'm sure you're aware of this, that there was a wild percentage of Americans who believe that the Obama presidency was not a uniting force in America. Despite all the promise and the historic nature of his presidency, people felt like the country was more divided and less united and angrier. And this is not like a Daily Caller poll, okay? I think it was the AP or Washington Post. Forgive me for not having it off the top of my head. I did it today on radio. But Monica, so the idea that Trump is the great divisive factor in America, it's not how a lot of people felt at the end of 8 years of Obama, which is why, in part, they elected Trump.
Well, that's exactly right. And what we saw over 8 years with President Obama is that while he was personally popular, people appreciated the fact that he was an exceptional character, the first African-American president. They were proud of that fact. His policies were wholly unpopular. And in some ways, that's the mirror image of Donald Trump, where personally he's not so popular, but his policies are incredibly popular. So, you know, and getting back to the Melania issue, any Republican first lady is going to be treated like this, Laura. It's just, you know, a fact of the double standard life in America, unfortunately, and it's really unfair to her. But I think Americans, by and large, are sick of the double standard, and that's why you have continuing support for President Trump, because he's trying to smash it.
Well, it's apparent, and Candace, we're almost out of time, but look, I mean, the Bushes did not criticize the Obamas. They didn't.
That's correct.
I mean, almost
that's
at all.
traditional.
Why would they? Why would they? I'm sorry, I know you're talking to Candace.
Because they doubled the debt, because
it's respectful.
Because we had Benghazi, because Obamacare was a cram down. Let me count the ways.
But they also didn't question whether or not Obama was born in this country. Like, I don't even understand how you can make.
These are cheap shots.
I don't even understand how you can make that connection at all.
I'm going to finish my. It's them trying to resuscitate their relevancy, because unfortunately,
they'll always be relevant.
This president has laid slaughter to the Obama legacy, and that's what's going on.
No, not at all.
All right, guys, thanks so much. And President Trump called out once again for his embrace of nationalism by the leader of a country who's benefited from American power, of course. The foremost intellectual on nationalism is here to answer Emmanuel Macron next.
I'm a nationalist, okay? I'm a nationalist.
Well, President Trump has defended his use of the term nationalism as an intense love of one's country. But leftist commentators and other internationalists say it's a dog whistle to white supremacists. And now, at an occasion commemorating the 100-year anniversary of the armistice ending World War I, French President Emmanuel Macron has joined the fray.
Patriotism is the exact opposite of nationalism. Nationalism is a betrayal of patriotism by saying, our interests first, who cares about the others?
Well, joining me now, Yoram Hazany. He's the author of the book, The Virtue of Nationalism, and Mark Simakovsky, former NATO Chief of Staff. Yoram, let me start with you. Now, what does Macron get wrong here about nationalism?
Well, Laura, Macron is pursuing the same agenda that he's iterated repeatedly since he was elected president of France a year and a half ago. Just in October at the United Nations, Macron told us he deplores a world that he calls a world of lawlessness in which everyone pursues their own interests. Macron has a problem with the idea of national interest. He says that national interest is national selfishness. And now he's telling President Trump that to be a nationalist and to pursue your own interests is a betrayal of moral values.
All right, Mark, this is what Christian Witten is saying about Macron's commentary. Let's watch.
I think Macron within the EU is under a lot of pressure. Frankly, Germany is willing to cut a deal on the trade changes that Trump wants, to lower tariffs across the board. Macron doesn't like that. He doesn't like the pressure. He doesn't like having to spend more on the military. He doesn't like the fact that Italy is, along with Britain, sort of peeling away from the EU, not quite as directly yet. Right. Eastern Europe, not as kosher on the EU. So a lot of these things just aren't going the way that this former investment banker would like them to go.
Yeah, Mark, if globalism of the sort that Macron loves and internationalism was helping the average, German or Frenchman, there wouldn't be a backlash against internationalism or globalism. There would be, let's do more of it. But they're under enormous pressure, are they not?
They absolutely are. I think this speech, there's two parts to this speech. One is Macron is encapsulating himself as in opposition to Trump, and he's betting that the French people believe and are supportive of an anti-Trump French
as the
leader.
National Front are pushing back on him right now. Obviously,
absolutely.
They've had gains in recent polls and recent local elections.
And this is risky for Macron because he has European elections coming up next year, which will be the first barometer for his own term. He's trying to put himself in polar opposite to Trump, and of course, he's isolated because Mrs. Merkel also, his political ambitions are on the decline. But also I think this was a warning. This speech was a warning to those that believe that the nationalism and populism that fueled World War I is on the rise and is a danger to the European continent. I think he was brave in making that statement at the speech.
Yoram, this is what Zainab Salbi said today about what nationalism actually creates. Let's watch.
What led to World War I and World War II is nationalism, basically.
Exactly.
It is divisions and fighting. European allies have seen the wars, have seen actually the consequences of what nationalism could destroy their own countries. And so when Macron says about collaboration and fighting together for the common good, when he talks about creating a European army, have to watch for these things. And I feel like this is the beginning of the European separation from Totally America. agree. And this is really scary.
This is really scary. Why is it scary for Europe to spend more money on Europe's defense? 100 years after the World War I armistice. Why is that calamitous to the internationalists? I'm not following that.
This is the same propaganda that we've been hearing from liberal intellectuals in Europe since right after World War II. They always have the same mantra that nationalism caused the world wars. Now, historically, if you go after World War I and you actually see, you'll see that most people after World War I believed 2.5 years and to lead to 20 million deaths was the life and death struggle between German imperialism trying to break the back of British imperialism in its effort to take over the world. After World War II, you can say the same thing. Adolf Hitler, if he hadn't wanted to take over the world, if he hadn't said in Mein Kampf that his goal was to make Germany the lord of the earth and mistress of the globe, well, he might have been a terrible German leader, but he would not have led to the deaths of 50 or 60 million people. So
All right, Mark,
this claim...
I see what you're saying, but Mark, just very quickly respond to that. Nation building, wanting to transpose our view of democracy on other nations. We've lost trillions of dollars, countless lives, damaged lives at home, depleted our military. We weren't pursuing a nationalist agenda in Iraq or Afghanistan or all throughout the Middle East, were we?
No, but I think what Mr. Macron is saying is that Europe has maintained peace when the transatlantic community has been united, has cooperated, when the common elements of common security, which NATO represents, actually supports American interests and supports French, German, UK interests. And there's a risk today that that transatlantic unity is falling apart. And
where are they going to go? Into the arms of China? I mean,
No.
where's Europe going to go?
I think the fear is that Trump is going to take the United States out of the game, and that Russia and China can create conflict like they're creating in eastern Ukraine, that China is creating in the South China Seas,
Right.
and the U.S. won't be there to help secure the peace.
All right, gentlemen, fascinating conversation. Thank you so much. And up next, we go live to the ground in California, where those devastating fires continue to ravage two separate parts of the state.
There's never been anything like this. I've never seen the devastation, carnage, never.